On the distant world of Varnok, under a red and endless sky, there stood an ancient sword buried deep inside a black stone pedestal. No one remembered who placed it there. No one remembered when it first appeared. But everyone on Varnok knew one thing. No living creature had ever lifted it. The sword was older than the cities, older than the empires, older than the stars that now burned low in the sky. Its blade shimmered with faint blue light, like frozen lightning trapped inside metal. The hilt was wrapped in strange markings that no alien scholar could read. They said it was written in the language of the first ones, beings that had shaped entire worlds before vanishing into dust. For thousands of years, the sword waited in silence. Warriors, kings, and conquerors came to claim it. They brought armies, machines, and power beyond imagination. Yet the sword stayed still. Heavy as a mountain, cold as death, every hand that touched it failed. Some were burned by its strange light. Some went mad and never spoke again, and some simply vanished into air, leaving only echoes. Because of this, the sword became more than a weapon. It became a legend. The Sword of Varnok, they called it, a test of worth, a challenge from the gods, and through the ages, the tale spread across the galaxy. Every alien child grew up hearing the same words. Whoever lifts the sword shall command the power of worlds. In the city of Karun, built around the sacred pedestal, the sword stood like a monument. Every festival, crowds gathered to watch brave souls try their luck. Trumpets played, lights blazed, and the people cheered. But the result was always the same. The sword did not move, the stone did not crack. The legend continued, generations passed. The people stopped believing the sword would ever choose a master. It became a symbol, a story to impress children, a relic to attract tourists. But some, the old priests of Varnok, still watched it day and night. They believed the sword was alive, waiting for a soul strong enough, not in muscle but in spirit. Then one night something changed. The sky tore open with a storm like no one had ever seen. Lightning fell in waves of fire, tearing the ground and painting the sky purple. The air was filled with a strange hum, and in that moment the sword began to glow. Its light spread through the streets, flickering like a heartbeat. The priest ran to the pedestal and fell to their knees. "The sword stirs," one whispered. "The time has come again." Far away, across the desert plains, a small ship crashed into the sand. Smoke rose, metal screamed, and fire lit the horizon inside the wreck. A single figure moved, and a human. No alien had seen a human on Varnok before. To them, humans were stories from the outer rim, a forgotten race from a forgotten world. Weak, fragile, and lost, but that night, fate had chosen differently. The human's name was Ethan Cole, an explorer, a survivor, a man who had lost everything. His mission was simple, to find life beyond the dead stars. But his ship had been hit by a solar storm, dragging him through worm space until he fell on this unknown planet. He crawled out of the wreckage, covered in dust. His breathing shallow above him, the red sky burned with strange lights, and somewhere far beyond the dunes, he saw the faint blue glow of something calling to him. In the city, the aliens felt uneasy. The storm would not end. The ground kept shaking. Animals ran wild, machines flickered, and the priests gathered once more at the temple. They spoke in fear. "The sword has awakened because an outsider has come. But how can that be?" Another said, "No alien, no machine, no god could lift it." "The prophecy never said it must be alien," the eldest priest whispered. "Only that one day, the worthy would come from the stars." For the first time in centuries, hope and fear walked side by side in the streets of Karun. Some believed this was the end. Others believed this was the beginning. The emperor ordered his guards to protect the sword at all costs. He feared that if it was taken, the balance of power across the stars would fall. But deep inside the temple, the sword pulsed brighter, as if hearing a distant heartbeat, as if answering a call from far away. That night, Ethan walked across the desert with the help of a flickering map from his damaged wrist pad. He saw the blue light again and followed it, step by step, through storms of dust and fire. His body was weak, his vision blurry, but his will was stronger than ever. He did not know what waited for him. He did not know that the light he followed was part of a story written before humanity learned to dream. He only knew one thing, and something was calling his name. By dawn, he reached the city. The gates opened as the guards stared at him. A thin creature in a broken suit, his eyes glowing with exhaustion. They had never seen a human before. They did not know what to do. So they took him to the Temple of the Sword. And when he saw it, the world around him seemed to fade. The sword's light matched the beat of his heart. Every pulse felt like a whisper. A welcome, a challenge, and in that silent moment, Ethan Cole, the lost human, took his first step toward destiny. On the planet where no alien could lift the sword until now. When the red sun rose over the broken dunes of Varnok, the city of Karun shone like glass under blood. The storm from the night before had finally ended, but the air was still thick, as if the planet itself held its breath. At the edge of the desert, smoke still rose from the wreck of the human ship. Its wings were torn apart, half buried under black sand. Strange symbols burned into the hull, glowing faintly like dying fireflies from that wreck. A single figure stumbled forward, the human named Ethan Cole. His face was pale, his suit cracked and torn, his oxygen pack nearly empty. He dragged himself step by step toward the distant light he saw the night before. Each time he fell, he pressed his hand against the sand and whispered, "Not yet." The planet felt alive beneath him. Every step echoed like a heartbeat through the ground. He had been alone in the void for months. He had seen stars collapse, friends vanish, and his ship torn apart by a storm that should not have existed, and yet, here he was, breathing on a world that wasn't supposed to be real, a world that called to him through dreams and whispers. He didn't understand why. He only knew one thing: he wasn't meant to die yet. By midday, he reached the outer walls of Karun. The walls were carved from crystal stone, glowing faintly with energy lines that moved like veins. Strange winged guards stood atop them, their armor black and shining. Their eyes widened when they saw the human. "By the suns," one muttered, "what creature is this?" They had seen many species, reptilian warriors, iron giants, shadow-born beings, but never one like him. He was small, fragile, and alone, yet there was something in his eyes, a spark that made them hesitate. The gates opened with a deep metallic hum. The guards surrounded him, weapons glowing. One of them, a tall alien with 4 arms and a scar across his chest, stepped forward. "You are trespassing on sacred ground," he said. Ethan's voice was dry, weak, but steady. I'm not here to fight," he whispered. "I just need to know what that light is." The guard frowned. "You mean the sword," he said slowly. "You came because of the sword." Ethan nodded without understanding why. He didn't even know what sword they were talking about. But the moment the word was spoken, the strange pulse inside him grew stronger. He could feel it, like something alive under his skin. They brought him through the shining streets. Aliens of many kinds stared as he passed, whispering among themselves. Some laughed, calling him weak, others looked uneasy. No one could explain the sudden glow that had returned to the Sword of Varnok since the night before. Ethan was taken to the great temple, a massive tower of black crystal. Inside, at the very center, stood the sword. It shone with blue light that danced across the walls. Ethan froze when he saw it, his heart pounded. His breathing stopped for a moment. He felt something pulling him closer. Like a magnet drawing metal, the guards noticed it too. The sword's light flickered, reacting to his presence. One of the priests gasped. "It responds to him," he whispered. Just like in the prophecy. The high priest stepped forward, a tall alien with skin like silver stone and eyes like stars. He looked at Ethan for a long time before speaking. "You are not of our kind," he said. "You come from beyond the known worlds," Ethan nodded. "I'm from Earth," he said softly. "Or at least, I was." The priest tilted his head. "Earth," he repeated as if tasting the word for the first time. "That name is old. Very old." He turned toward the sword. "For 10,000 cycles, the strongest of our kind have tried to lift it," he said. "But none were chosen." He looked back at Ethan. "And yet when you entered our world, it woke." Ethan stared at the sword in silence. The air around it seemed to move like water, glowing brighter each time he took a step closer. The crowd murmured, fear and curiosity mixing like fire and ice. A voice shouted from the back, "This is madness! He's just a weak creature from the void. The sword would destroy him." But the priest raised a hand. "Let the sword decide," he said quietly. "The legends say it will choose, not us." Ethan took one step closer, then another. The ground hummed under his boots. The sword's light pulsed with every heartbeat. His fingers shook as he reached out. He didn't know why he was doing this. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe destiny, maybe both. He touched the hilt. The world exploded in sound. A blinding light filled the temple, throwing the guards and priests backward. The ground cracked and a shockwave tore through the city. For a brief second, Ethan felt weightless, floating in a sea of blue light. And then, silence. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath. The sword had not moved, but something inside him had. He could feel its energy burning in his veins. The crowd stared in disbelief for the first time in centuries. The sword had reacted not to an alien king, not to a god, but to a human. The high priest stepped forward, eyes wide. The sword spoke to him, he whispered. It has chosen. The guards dragged Ethan away before he could speak. He was thrown into a cell deep below the temple. Alone, exhausted and shaking, but in the darkness, he could still feel it, that heartbeat of blue light echoing through his chest. The sword was not done with him yet, and far above, in the temple chamber, the sword of Varnok glowed brighter than ever before. Its light reached the stars, as if calling to something ancient, something human, something that the universe had long forgotten. The legend had begun again, and this time, it was no longer about power. It was about destiny. The city of Karun did not sleep that night. Every tower, every street, every market buzzed with a single question. Who is the human, and why did the sword awaken for him? Rumors spread faster than the storm winds. Some said the human was a ghost from the stars. Some whispered he was the rebirth of an ancient warrior, and others claimed he was a curse sent to destroy them all. But inside the cold stone walls of the temple prison, Ethan Cole sat in silence. The chains around his wrists were made of glowing metal that pulsed like a heartbeat. He stared at the floor, breathing slowly, feeling the strange hum inside his chest. It was faint but constant, like the echo of the sword itself. He could feel it calling to him, whispering words he didn't understand. He remembered the moment he touched the blade, the flash, the light, the sound of the world breaking apart. And for a second he had seen something in a vision, images of burning worlds, warriors of light, and a human hand holding the sword in another time. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew this was not over. A loud crash broke his thoughts. The door to his cell opened, and the silver-skinned high priest entered. Behind him stood two guards, their eyes wary. The Emperor demands a test, the priest said. Tomorrow you will face the sword again. Before all of Karun, Ethan frowned. Why? He asked. Because the people fear you, the priest replied calmly. And the Emperor needs proof that you are just a man, not a god. Ethan gave a tired smile. Then they'll be disappointed, he whispered. The next morning, the great arena was filled. Thousands of aliens from every corner of the planet gathered to watch. The arena floor was made of shining white stone, and in its center stood the sword, glowing brighter than ever before. Above, banners waved in the hot wind, carrying the symbol of the Emperor. Trumpets roared, drums thundered, and the crowd shouted. They came to see a human fail. They came to see the sword reject him again. Ethan walked into the arena escorted by guards. His face was calm, his eyes fixed on the glowing blade. The high priest stood near the edge, whispering prayers in a language older than memory. And high above, on a golden throne, the Emperor watched with cold, sharp eyes. A voice echoed through the arena. Ethan Cole of the world called Earth, the announcer said. You are charged with trespassing upon sacred ground, disturbing the sword of Varnok, and defying the will of the Emperor. But the Emperor grants you one chance. Lift the sword, and prove your worth. The crowd roared with laughter. Some shouted insults, others threw dust into the air, but Ethan didn't hear them. All he could hear was the low hum inside his chest. It matched the rhythm of the sword's light. Pulsing in perfect time, he stepped forward. Each step echoed across the arena. The ground trembled slightly. He could feel eyes watching him from every direction. Fear mixed with curiosity, anger mixed with wonder. He reached the pedestal. The sword stood before him, shining like captured lightning. He raised his hand slowly, his fingers trembling. And when he touched the hilt again, the light exploded. The air around him rippled, waves of blue energy spreading across the arena. The ground cracked under his feet. The pedestal groaned. Gasps echoed from the crowd. The Emperor leaned forward, eyes wide. Ethan clenched his jaw, every muscle in his body shaking. It felt like the sword was testing him, measuring him. He felt its power push against his strength, trying to break him. Images flashed in his mind again, galaxies, ancient battles, and a woman's voice whispering. Prove them wrong, he screamed. Pulling harder, the sword moved, Just an inch. The pedestal cracked, dust flying into the air. The crowd fell silent for the first time in history. The sword of Varnok had shifted then in a blinding burst of energy. It threw him backward. Ethan hit the ground hard, rolling across the stone, gasping for air. The guards rushed forward. The crowd roared in shock and disbelief. The sword glowed brighter, humming like a storm trapped inside metal. And then slowly it went still again. Ethan lay on the ground, blood running from his arm, his body trembling. He looked up at the blade and smiled weakly. "I'll try again," he whispered under his breath. The high priest approached him, eyes full of awe. "You moved it," he said, his voice shaking. "No one has ever done that." The emperor stood, his voice booming through the arena. "This creature is dangerous," he declared. "The sword responds to him, and that makes him a threat." The crowd cheered. Half in fear, half in anger, Ethan was dragged away again, his body broken but his spirit burning brighter than ever. That night, as the stars rose over Karun, Ethan sat alone in the dark cell. He could still feel the hum of the sword deep within him. He remembered the moment it moved, the raw energy flowing through his hands. He wasn't just guessing anymore, and he knew. The sword wasn't rejecting him, it was waiting for him to understand. He closed his eyes, hearing the whispers again. Old voices, ancient and distant. Not strength, not power, but heart, they said. He smiled. The aliens thought the test was about might, but he knew it was about something deeper. And as he drifted into sleep, the sword far above began to glow again, softly, rhythmically, like two hearts beating as one. The night on Varnok was alive with whispers. The stars above looked like cold eyes watching the city below in the great temple. The sword of Varnok stood glowing faintly, as if remembering the touch of the human. Its light pulsed in slow rhythm, echoing through the stone walls. The priests watched it from afar, afraid to go near, deep beneath the temple. In the silent prison cell, Ethan Cole couldn't sleep. The hum inside his chest had grown stronger. It was not just a sound anymore, it was a heartbeat that wasn't his own. He closed his eyes, and suddenly, he saw flashes again, ruins of ancient cities, skies filled with fire, soldiers made of light and metal, and in the center of it all, the same sword, held by a figure wearing a broken earth insignia. Ethan gasped and opened his eyes, sweat running down his face. He could still hear the echo of that voice from his dream. "Not strength, not power, but heart," it whispered again. He looked at his hands and muttered, "What are you trying to show me?" Outside, the high priest walked through the dark hallways, his silver eyes glowing in the dim light. He stopped at the cell door and looked in. "The sword calls to you," he said softly. Ethan looked up. "Then why does it try to kill me?" The priest smiled faintly. "Because it must know your truth first." He unlocked the cell and motioned for Ethan to follow. They walked through long tunnels that glowed faintly with blue light. "The sword of Varnok," the priest began, "is not from this world. It came from the stars long before our people learned to build cities," Ethan frowned. "Then who made it?" The priest hesitated before answering. "The oldest texts say it was made by two species together. One of light, one of flesh. One built the power, the other gave it purpose." Ethan stopped walking. "Are you saying humans helped make it?" he asked quietly. The priest nodded. "Your kind once walked among the stars, long before our memory. You were not conquerors then, but builders, dreamers, allies. When the great war of creation began, your kind vanished, and with them the secret of the sword." Ethan's heart pounded. Pieces of his vision started to make sense. The burning worlds, the soldiers, the mark on the chest of that ancient figure. He was seeing fragments of humanity's forgotten past, a history erased by time and silence. They entered a hidden chamber deep below the temple. The walls were covered in old carvings, half alien, half human. Ethan touched one, tracing the faint image of a human hand holding the sword. The metal beneath his fingers felt warm. "It's true," he whispered. "We were here." The priest turned toward him. "The sword remembers bloodlines," he said. "It carries the memory of those who created it. That is why it reacts to you." Ethan stared at the carvings, feeling both awe and fear. "So, it's not just a weapon," he said. "No," the priest replied. "It's a bridge between two worlds that once stood together." Ethan sat down, his mind spinning. If humanity once had this kind of connection, what happened? Why did they fall? He thought of Earth, broken, divided, fading from the stars, and he felt a strange fire rising inside him. If this sword was a memory of what humans once were, maybe it could also be the start of what they could become again. Suddenly, the chamber trembled, dust fell from the ceiling, and distant explosions echoed through the tunnels. The priest turned sharply. "Dravak!" he hissed. Ethan looked confused. "Who?" "General Dravak," the priest replied. "He commands the Emperor's army. He fears you, and he fears what the sword will reveal." The walls shook again. Louder this time, screams echoed from above, followed by the sound of marching soldiers. "They've come for you," the priest said. "You must go. Now." He led Ethan through a narrow passage behind the carvings. Torches flickered, the air thick with dust. Ethan's pulse matched the hum of the sword even from miles away. He could feel it, awake, angry, alive. They reached an exit leading into the dark streets. The city burned in places, bright beams of energy cutting through towers. Dravak's soldiers searched the alleys with drones and scanners. Ethan turned to the priest. "Why are you helping me?" The priest's voice was calm. "Because the sword has chosen and no emperor can change destiny." A drone passed overhead, its red eye scanning the ground. The priest pushed Ethan into the shadows. "Find the truth," he whispered. "Only then will the sword be yours." Ethan nodded. And before he could speak again, the priest stepped into the light. Drawing the soldiers' attention, they shouted, weapons raised, and a blast of fire lit up the street. Ethan ran into the dark, heart pounding. He didn't stop until he reached the edge of the city. The glowing towers behind him looked like a dying sun. He fell to his knees, gasping, staring up at the stars. The hum in his chest grew stronger, a call. A guide. He looked at the sky and whispered, "You're not just a weapon. Are you far away inside the temple ruins?" The sword floated slightly above its pedestal. It shone with a steady light, whispering in an ancient human voice, "Find the bond. Find the heart." And in that moment, every alien on Varnok felt the ground tremble. Every machine flickered, every creature turned its head. The sword had chosen its path, and the human was now part of it. The city of Karun burned under a sky of fire. The once shining towers now glowed with smoke and destruction. The people ran through the streets as soldiers in black armor marched, spreading fear with every step above them. The Emperor's banners waved, carrying the mark of the serpent. And at the center of the chaos, General Dravak stood tall, his red eyes glowing with anger. He had served the Emperor for decades. He had fought wars, conquered worlds, and crushed rebellions. But now his pride was wounded. A simple, fragile creature and a human had moved the sacred sword when no alien could. Dravak's claws clenched, his voice a low growl. "That thing does not belong here," he said to his officers. "The sword belongs to our people, not to some lost animal from the stars." His soldiers nodded. Afraid to disagree, they knew Dravak's rage well. His power was legend. He could command storms, tear metal with his bare hands, and silence enemies with a single word. But beneath that power lived fear. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. In the shadows beyond the burning streets, Ethan Cole moved carefully. The wind carried ash and smoke, but his mind was clear. He remembered the high priest's words, "Find the truth, find the heart." His body ached, his wounds burned, but the hum of the sword still echoed in his chest. He knew it was calling him, guiding him towards something deeper. He found a small shelter among the ruins. Inside, a group of alien rebels hid, outcasts who no longer served the Emperor. They aimed their weapons at him the moment he entered. "Stay back, human," one hissed, his skin like stone and his eyes glowing green. Ethan raised his hand slowly. "I'm not your enemy," he said. One of them lowered his weapon. "You're the one who touched the sword," he said quietly. Ethan nodded. "And because of that, Dravak wants me dead." The leader, an older alien with scars across his face, stepped forward. "Dravak wants everyone dead who believes in the old prophecy," he said. "He thinks if you die, the sword will sleep again." Ethan sighed. "Then I guess I have to make sure it doesn't." Above the city, inside the Emperor's palace, Dravak met with his ruler. The Emperor was ancient, his body frail but his mind sharp as steel. He watched the fires from his balcony, his golden robes flickering in the light. "You are certain the sword reacted to the human?" he asked. Dravak bowed. "Yes, my Emperor," it responded to his touch. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Then destroy him before the sword accepts him completely." Dravak smiled darkly. "Already planned." That night, as Ethan rested with the rebels, the walls around him trembled. Explosions lit up the sky. Red beams cutting through the ruins. Dravak's army had found them. "Run!" shouted the leader, grabbing his weapon. Ethan turned to help, but before he could, the ground beneath him cracked open. He fell through the floor into a dark underground passage. When he opened his eyes, he was alone. The tunnel was cold and ancient, lined with symbols glowing faintly blue. He realized he had fallen into another hidden chamber. The hum in his chest grew louder, almost painful now. He followed it, limping, until he reached a circular room filled with strange lights. At the center stood a crystal pedestal, and inside it, a holographic figure flickered to life. It was a woman, human, wearing an ancient space uniform with the same insignia he had seen in his dreams. Her voice was soft but clear. "If you are seeing this, then humanity has returned," she said. "We built the sword as a bond between species, not as a weapon, but as a promise." Ethan's eyes widened. "A promise," he whispered. The hologram continued. "It will only answer to one who carries both strength and compassion, one who sees unity, not power." The image faded slowly, leaving Ethan in silence. He stood there for a long moment, then whispered, "So that's it. It's not about control, it's about connection." Suddenly, he heard footsteps above, heavy and fast. Dravak's soldiers were closing in. Ethan climbed out of the tunnel, his body weak but his spirit stronger than ever. He saw the city gates ahead, his only way out. But waiting there was Dravak himself. His massive frame blocked the path, lightning dancing around his armor. "You should have stayed in the dark." "Human," Dravak said, his voice like thunder. "The sword is ours." Ethan raised his chin, his tone calm but steady. "The sword belongs to whoever understands it." Dravak's eyes burned with fury. "Then let's see if you survive without it," he growled. He charged forward, the ground shaking with every step. Ethan dodged, barely avoiding a crushing blow. He grabbed a fallen weapon from the ground, a small energy blade. It hummed weakly in his hands, but it was enough. Dravak swung again, his power tearing through the air. Ethan ducked, rolling across the sand, striking back with speed, but Dravak's armor was too strong. He kicked Ethan hard, sending him crashing into a wall. The human gasped, blood in his mouth, but still stood up. Dravak laughed. "You fight like a fool," he said. Ethan wiped his mouth. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I fight like a human." A bright light exploded in the sky. The sword's glow reached across the city. Piercing the clouds, both of them turned to look. The sword was moving, slowly rising from its pedestal. Dravak's face turned pale. "No, it can't be." The light hit Ethan like a wave. Lifting him to his feet, he felt warmth spread through him. Calm, strong, unstoppable. Dravak roared and charged again, but this time Ethan didn't move. He raised his hand and energy crackled in the air. The sword's light wrapped around him like armor. Dravak's attack hit an invisible force and sent him flying back. He crashed into the burning wall. Defeated, Ethan fell to one knee, exhausted but alive. The sword's light slowly faded from the sky. The battle was not over yet, but something had changed. The people of Karun had seen the truth with their own eyes. The sword had protected the human, and Dravak's betrayal had only made its choice clearer. The morning after the battle, the city of Karun stood in silence. Smoke still rose from the broken towers. The people moved like shadows through the streets, whispering about what they had seen. The sword had moved again, and this time, the whole world had witnessed it. The emperor sat in his high palace, his face pale and trembling. The reports came one after another. Soldiers retreating, citizens turning restless. Whispers spread through every corner. "The sword protects the human," they said. "The prophecy is true." General Dravak lay in the ruins of the eastern gate. His armor cracked, his pride shattered. He stared at the sky, still burning with the memory of blue light. In his heart, hate boiled like fire. He had failed to destroy the human, and now the legend he feared most had come alive before his eyes. Far from the city walls, Ethan Cole rested in the desert cave, his body weak but his spirit awake. The sword's light still flickered faintly in his mind, a quiet hum that refused to fade. He could feel it watching him, or maybe guiding him. He didn't know which, but he trusted it now. He thought of the words spoken by the hologram of the ancient human. "The sword is not a weapon, but a promise." It echoed again and again in his thoughts. Maybe this was never about war or strength. Maybe it was about unity. about remembering what humanity once stood for. He looked at the horizon where the twin suns were rising. Their light fell on the city far away, glowing red and gold. He stood slowly, gripping his damaged wrist pad. The rebels he had met before were gone. Scattered or dead, he was alone again. But the hum in his chest told him this was not the end. That evening, under a crimson sky, the high priest appeared at the cave entrance. He looked tired but unbroken. "The city has changed," he said quietly. "The people are afraid of the Emperor now. They've seen what the sword can do." Ethan nodded. "Then I have to finish this." The priest lowered his head. "The Emperor has summoned you," he said. Ethan frowned. "He wants me dead." "Maybe," the priest replied. "Or maybe he just wants to see if the prophecy is true." By nightfall, Ethan walked once more into Karun. Crowds followed him from the shadows, their eyes filled with wonder and fear. No guard stopped him. Not one dared. Even the air felt different, charged with something ancient and powerful. At the center of the city, the arena glowed once again. The sword stood waiting in the heart of it, floating slightly above its pedestal. The Emperor sat on his throne of gold and crystal. Dravak stood beside him, his armor repaired. Though his pride was not, he glared at Ethan with hate sharp enough to cut steel. Ethan said nothing. He only looked at the sword, his eyes steady, his steps calm. The Emperor's voice echoed through the arena. "Human from Earth," he said, "you have shaken my city and my people with your presence. Now we will see if destiny truly favors your kind." He raised his hand. "Lift the sword if you can." The arena fell silent. Even the wind stopped moving. Ethan walked toward the glowing pedestal. Each step felt heavier than the last. He remembered his first attempt. The pain, the explosion, the failure, but this time, something was different. The sword didn't resist him. It was waiting. He reached out, his hand trembling. The air shimmered around the blade like liquid light. When his fingers touched the hilt, the ground began to hum, a deep, rising sound that shook every stone in the arena. Ethan closed his eyes, whispering softly, "I'm not here to take power. I'm here to understand." And then, it happened. A surge of blue light burst from the pedestal. Rising into the sky, the clouds split open. Lightning spiraled across the heavens. Every creature on Varnok fell to its knees. The sword rose slowly but surely, breaking free from the stone. It hovered in the air, glowing like a star, and then it flew into Ethan's hands. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, the light wrapped around him. It wasn't just light, it was memory, energy, life itself. He saw everything, and the rise and fall of civilizations, the creation of the sword, the old alliance between humans and aliens. He saw peace, war, loss, and hope. And through it all, one message repeated: the sword belongs to the one who remembers who they are. The crowd gasped as Ethan lifted the blade high. Blue fire flowed around him, yet he stood calm, steady, unshaken. Dravik's eyes widened in disbelief. The Emperor stood trembling. The priests fell to the ground in prayer. The energy spread across the city, healing broken machines, calming the storms, restoring light to the towers everywhere the glow reached. Destruction turned to harmony. The people cried out, and not in fear, but in awe. The sword had chosen. Ethan lowered the blade, its glow fading softly. He turned toward the Emperor, his voice quiet but strong. "The sword never belonged to any one world," he said. "It was meant to unite us, not divide us." Dravak stepped forward in rage. "You think you can rule us?" he shouted. Ethan shook his head. "No," he said simply. "I'm not here to rule, I'm here to remind." The Emperor fell silent. The crowd murmured for the first time in ages. Varnok's air felt alive, full of possibility. Ethan looked at the sword, the glow now steady and calm. It no longer felt heavy. It felt right. He lifted it once more, and the light responded, shining across the horizon. The stars themselves seemed to move, aligning above the arena. And somewhere deep in the void, far from Varnok, other ancient weapons stirred, awakening after endless ages of sleep. Ethan looked to the sky and whispered, "It's not over yet." The winds rose, carrying his words across the desert. The sword hummed softly in his hand. Like a heartbeat waiting for the next battle, the prophecy had been fulfilled. But destiny was only just beginning. The light faded slowly from the arena. Dust floated in the air like silver mist. Every eye in Karun watched in silence as the humans stood in the center, holding the glowing sword for the first time in 10,000 years. The Sword of Varnok had chosen. Ethan Cole breathed deeply, feeling the hum of the weapon in his hands. It was alive, not a machine, not a tool, but something far older. Its energy pulsed through him like a second heartbeat. He felt stronger, lighter, yet deeply calm. It was as if the sword and his soul had become one. Around him, the crowd knelt, unsure whether to worship or fear him. Even the Emperor lowered his head, his golden crown trembling in his grasp. Dravak, still standing at the edge of the arena, watched in silence, his face pale and broken. He had seen power in many forms, weapons, armies, storms, but never like this. This was something beyond control, beyond logic, beyond fear. The sword's blue light spread through the sky. Touching the clouds, then the ground began to glow. From the deserts to the mountains, from the oceans to the forgotten ruins, lines of light spread outward. It was as if the entire planet had awakened. The people gasped as the ancient symbols carved into their streets began to shine. "The sword is speaking to the world," whispered the high priest, tears in his eyes. "The bond is complete." Ethan raised the blade and felt a pull deep inside his mind. Suddenly he saw visions, bright and endless. He stood in the center of a cosmic storm. Surrounded by stars, voices echoed around him, voices of humans and aliens, past and future. "You have remembered," they said, "the bond between species, the promise that was forgotten." Ethan saw the truth. Humanity had once been the bridge between countless civilizations. They were never the strongest or the most advanced, but they were the only ones who could connect. Understand, unite, that was humanity's true power. When he opened his eyes again, the sword pulsed brighter. Its light reached beyond the clouds, cutting across space itself and far above. In the darkness between stars, something answered. Old stations long dead began to blink with blue light. Ancient satellites buried in forgotten orbits reactivated. Echoes of the human past stirred again. The aliens of Karun stared at the sky in awe. "What is happening?" someone cried. "The sword is calling to others," said the priest. "It remembers where it came from." Ethan felt the connection growing stronger. He could sense distant signals returning to life, forgotten human colonies, drifting ships, sleeping AI stations. It was like humanity's ghost was waking up from a long dream. Dravak fell to his knees, his rage turning to fear. "You'll destroy us all," he shouted. Ethan looked at him calmly. "No," he said softly. "I'll save you." Dravak roared and charged one last time. But as he swung his blade, the sword in Ethan's hand flashed. There was no sound, no clash, and just light. And when the light faded, Dravak stood frozen. His weapon dissolved into dust. He dropped to the ground, unhurt but defeated, staring at Ethan in disbelief. "What are you?" he whispered. Ethan looked at him, his voice gentle. "Human." The crowd erupted into cries and cheers. Some shouted his name, others wept openly. The high priest stepped forward and bowed. "You have done what gods could not," he said. "You brought balance." Ethan shook his head. "No," he said. "The sword did. I just listened." The Emperor stood, his voice shaking. "What will you do now?" he asked. Ethan looked toward the horizon where the twin suns began to rise again. "The sword is not meant to stay in one place," he said. "It was made to guide." He turned to the people of Varnok, his voice steady and clear. "This world is alive, and now it remembers what unity means. Protect it, grow with it. Don't let it fall to pride again." He raised the sword once more, and a beam of light shot into the sky. The sound that followed was soft but powerful, a deep hum that spread across the planet. The storms vanished, the skies cleared, the seas grew calm. Plants began to bloom across the barren lands. The sword's energy healed the world itself. The people fell to their knees. Crying with joy, it was not a weapon of war, but a gift of renewal. Ethan looked at the blade, its light now calm and warm. "You've done enough," he whispered. The sword hummed softly. As if answering, then it lifted slightly, floating above his hand. Slowly it began to fade, breaking into small particles of blue light. Each piece drifted into the air, spreading across the planet like stars. The Sword of Varnok had become part of the world again. The high priest looked up in awe. "It chose to return to the people," he said. Ethan smiled faintly. "It never wanted to be worshipped," he said. "It just wanted to remind us who we are." He walked to the city gates as the light faded behind him. The people followed quietly, not daring to speak. When he reached the edge of the desert, he stopped and looked back one last time. Karun glowed softly under the morning sun, alive again. Ethan turned toward the endless horizon and whispered, "Humanity has returned." He took one step forward, then another, disappearing into the golden light above him. The stars shimmered, brighter than ever before. Somewhere far away, other ancient swords began to awaken. Other worlds stirred with forgotten energy. The universe itself seemed to whisper in return, "The humans have come home." And so ended the legend of the Sword of Varnok, not as a tale of conquest, but of connection, not of power, but of unity. The sword's true power was never destruction, and it was remembrance. The memory that across all stars, all races, all time, humanity still mattered.